Hello, and welcome back to Unit 5. You should have answered this question yesterday. And if not, please go back and watch Lesson 2 before you start this video. So, this question, which statement best explains how the lack of rivers in the South affected the economy in those areas? It was kind of a tricky question. All of these answers that you see could have been correct. But if we read through them, we would have found that the best answer is B. The economy had more challenges because there was not an easy way to ship goods. This was the best answer because their economy was still surviving from the large farms that were located in the South. But without easy access to any major rivers, they had to seek out other ways to ship and move goods. So, we're going to watch a video to learn more about the Industrial Revolution. And as you watch, I want you to think about these two questions. What inventions are being shown in the video, and what changed because of these inventions? You are going to go back and answer them on a graphic organizer after this video is over. So if you think about it while we watch, it should be easy to answer these questions in your Google Classroom afterwards.
In the late 1700s, most people worked in the fields on land they did not own. Those who owned the land, called aristocrats, lived refined lives in elegant manor houses. Servants raised their children and did their housework. The landowners and the people who worked for them depended upon each other. It was a system that had existed for centuries. In towns across England and the United States, a series of extraordinary innovations would alter the way people lived and worked for the next 150 years. Inventors had found new ways to harness nature's energy. They built new kinds of machines powered by water, steam, and coal. The new machines replaced hand-powered tools. They did the same work, only cheaper and faster. Much of the work was done outside the home, in specially designed buildings, the first factories. Mechanization began in the textile mills of England, where one machine attached to a spinning wheel could do the work of 50 people. Fuel, clothing, and food all became more affordable. With the development of locomotives and steamboats, manufactured goods could now be sold halfway around the world. Families moved from the villages of their ancestors to new industrial towns. And a new class of people emerged, workers who produced goods. Industrialists, the people who owned the factories, employed hundreds, sometimes thousands of people. And they made enormous profits in their industrial centers. But while the Industrial Revolution brought wealth to some and jobs for others, it came with a price tag. Pollution from coal-powered factories turned the cities black. Lack of housing created the first urban slums. And the demand for more and more goods and higher profits brought the exploitation of workers, including children. Some of the worst conditions were seen in the textile mills of New England. In the 1830s, a 10-year-old mill girl described her life.
We were paid $2 a week, and the working hours of all the girls extended from 5 o'clock in the morning till 7 in the evening, with 1.5 hour for breakfast and for dinner.
It was the hiring of children, some as young as 5 years old, throughout the 1800s and early 1900s, that outraged the public. Workers and reformers protested. They formed unions and associations and fought for government regulations to limit the workday and protect children. These laws helped address many of the abuses brought on by the Industrial Revolution. Today, we are in the middle of another revolution, a technological revolution. We live in what's called the global village, because we can connect with people around the world as if they lived next door. And we can now work anytime and anywhere. We will have to wait and see where this new revolution leads.
Okay, so after watching that video, we should be able to answer these questions on our graphic organizer. What inventions are being shown in the video and what changed because of these inventions? I want you to pause this video now and go back to the graphic organizer on your Google Classroom and try to answer these questions. Welcome back. You should have already written down your answers. And maybe you talked about some of the inventions shown. They showed some water and coal-powered machines. And it told us that what changed because of those machines was that now work was able to be done a lot cheaper and a lot faster. You might have written down that there was locomotives and steamboats being invented. And this made it to where we could move products around the world. You might have also talked about some of the bad changes that happened. Things like pollution was getting really heavy in the air, and there was a lack of housing for some people. So it created what they called those urban slums. You might have written down lots of other things too. There's a lot of information in that video, so hopefully you were able to find some answers. Now we're going to watch this video that talks about something called the assembly line. Maybe you've heard of Henry Ford before. As we watch this video, I want you to, again, think about these questions, because on a separate document in your Google Classroom, you're also going to answer these questions. What invention is featured or discussed in the film, and how did this invention impact people's lives? So think about those questions as we watch this video.
The assembly line is one of those things that, again, Henry Ford didn't invent. And you're hard-pressed to figure out who invented the assembly line. If you begin to study older industries prior to the automobile industry, you see people building tin cans on an assembly line. Now, building a tin can is a fairly simple thing to do. You know, bend some tin, solder it, put a top and a bottom on it. But there's actually something that looks very much like an assembly line to build that. And other industries were using things like that. The Waltham watch people didn't quite have a full-blown assembly line, but they were cranking out a lot of watches with a bunch of people assembling them. One of the things that was apparently very influential, however, was not so much an assembly operation, but a disassembly operation. Ford, or some of his engineers, it's hard to tell who, maybe both, went to or certainly read about the slaughterhouses in Chicago, where you'd take the carcass of a cow or a hog and you'd hang it up on a moving conveyor, and it moved down a row, and the meat cutters hacked pieces of it off and disassembled the thing. Somebody said, what if we turn that idea around? What if we put something we need to make on some kind of moving conveyor and move it past workers and add pieces? And that seems to have been the genesis of the assembly line. And they started out small on sub-assemblies before they got to the whole chassis. But that was a case of, there's not really any evidence that Henry Ford said, boys, what we need is some kind of assembly line. But he'd so imbued his people with this obsession of speeding up production and lowering cost that they were constantly looking for better ways to do it. And they hit on this assembly line idea and then developed it and perfected it. If that idea itself isn't innovative, that's one of the ways that you drive innovation is to keep saying, I want to make it faster, better, cheaper.
Okay, so go ahead and pause this video and go to your separate document and answer these questions. What invention was featured or discussed in the film, and how did that invention impact people's lives? So Henry Ford's assembly line. Let's talk about how this assembly line was a game changer. Before the assembly line, the cost of a vehicle was ridiculous. I mean, the first Model T series cost about $850, which would be about $26,000 today. After the implementation of the assembly line, the average car cost dropped to only $260. So, how did the assembly line affect the cost of a vehicle? Well, the assembly line allowed for people to specialize in just one skill. Instead of one person working on an entire car, this allowed for cars to be produced or made quickly. Remember from earlier lessons about supply and demand? Well, we're going to learn more about that tomorrow. So, make a claim. What effect did the assembly line have on the supply of Model T cars? I want you to connect your claim to a theme of social studies. And tomorrow in lesson 4, we will discuss the answer.